Ladies and gentlemen, hello, welcome to the second conference of today. And we are going to kick things off with a topic that has been rising since last year, predominantly, which is about AI. You know the famous AI tools such as Midjourney, DALL-E, ChatGPT, and GPT itself. We even had last year a conference about Codex, which is the basis on which some coding tools based on AI is self-based. But since those tools rose to general availability, there has been a lot of problems regarding whether you use it correctly or not. So you will have the privilege today to listen to the amazing talk about the ethics of generative artificial intelligence presented to you by the amazing speaker, Jen Looper.
Okay, I guess it's me. Is it me? It's me. Okay, wonderful. Oh, I'm so delighted to be here, back on the stage at DevFest Nantes. This is such a privilege for me. I was here 4 years ago when the theme was rock and roll, so it was all guitars and everything on stage. It was really, really great. I remember I did a talk about the Beatles. I did a whole mobile app around the Beatles, and it was fantastic. It was very interactive. I love to do interactive style talks, so I'll be asking questions. I'll be inviting your thoughts as an audience. And today we're going to talk about the ethics of generative AI. And I'm coming at this from a humanist standpoint. I'm someone who cares deeply about where we as humans are centered in this discourse, where we ourselves can place ourselves, whereas all of this technology is kind of swirling around. Where are we as humans able to discuss these topics? My name's Jen Looper, and I'm the head of academic advocacy at AWS at Amazon, so I'm delighted to be here, so happy to be here. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. So I am head of academic advocacy, as I said, and we are the home of Cloud Clubs. So this is a program that I helped launch on my team in academic advocacy within developer relations. I have a lot of swag up here, so I'm going to be incentivizing, aka bribing you, to ask awesome questions. So if you have any questions, let's see, it's like a boutique up here. I have jewelry, I have keychains, I have stickers. And I have my latest book. So this was the first book that I published. This is Computer Science for Kids. I've written a second book that'll come in December 7th, and it's called The Illustrated Guide to AWS. But this one I have with me, and it's signed, so that makes it much more valuable, right? So the best question will get this book, okay? So that is your bribe, and that is your incentive. I also have other bribes here. So I really love for you to engage with me and talk about these really interesting and important topics. Et si vous voulez parler en français, on pourra le faire aussi, il n'y a pas de problème. So I've talked about my books, so those are the two books. My education, I actually am an ex-French teacher, so that's my claim to fame. Long time ago, I thought that it would be an amazing idea to get a PhD in medieval French and decide to teach medieval French literature. Turns out that is not so easy to do, especially in the United States. And it was a lucky moment, because in about the year 2000, I was able to retrain and join the dot-com boom, when it was a moment when if you knew a little bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you could get a job. I think the bar is higher now, but that was a lucky moment for me. So I've been a developer for 23 years, and it's been a really exciting ride to just watch the evolution of the industry. You know, we were building websites that were really hideous, you know, with lots of tabs back in the 2000s, you know, and then moving along into looking at the back end and other topics as we went along. And I switched to DevRel about 7-8 years ago, so it's been a while. I'm a mom of two, and like I said, I'm a humanist. I'm really interested in where we as people are kind of able to situate ourselves when talking about AI. And full disclosure, this picture of me is generated with a little help from AI. So I have this picture on LinkedIn, and my daughter, who's now grown up, and she said, Mommy, what is this picture? This is not you. My husband said the same thing, but it's interesting because it is a strange moment when people you're related to are looking at images of their relations and they don't recognize you. What have you done? What's going on here? So, but I just want to be, full disclosure, how we're using these tools. Okay, so this is the agenda that I've created for this talk, and it's 6 parts. So we're going to talk a little bit about the road to generative AI, how we got here. And I want to take a look at the special case of education. Education is the sector that I'm working in, and even if you're no longer students, how many students are here, by the way? Oh, a couple. That's great. You get stickers by default, de facto. So any educators here, any teachers? Teachers, fantastic. You are the heroes in this new world. So I want to talk about education because even if you're not in the sector, you're not a classroom teacher, you're still going to be senior developers mentoring younger developers who are coming into the field. So we'll talk about this a little bit. I want to talk about the major issues that we're encountering with regards to using AI ethically. I want to give a little overview of some of the ethics frameworks that are being created. I found 17 of them. We're not going to talk about all of them, but I have them listed. A lot of companies are launching their own frameworks, so let's talk about it. I want to give then a little bit different perspective. And I want to talk about how we can draw on the traditions, the humanistic traditions that we inherited, to look at different types of ethics and how we as individuals can influence decisions that are coming, from our managers and from our companies asking us to do things, and how we now can use this toolbox that I'm going to give to you to go ahead and make the right decisions on how to use and how to generate your next apps with these new tools. And then I want to step back into history. It's amazing. We just had this amazing keynote looking, way forward, and it's way high tech, and it's really amazing. I'm going to take you back. And all of my slides have back dates, so that we're looking at old movies, we're looking at, really old stuff. And I really want to think way, way, way back towards the invention of the printing press, right? And what that meant for us going forward and how we can kind of contextualize this by looking at history. So I don't want this to be a doom and gloom kind of talk. This is an exciting moment we're living in. But I think we need to just give a little bit of context and place ourselves right in the center. Okay, so here is where we are. We are on the road. We are on the road to generative AI. As Dorothy said, we are not in Kansas anymore. I'm actually from Missouri, which is the next state over from Kansas. We have the same tornadoes. I grew up, hiding in the basement. I can tell you one thing, when the sky turns green, that's when you go to the basement. We're not messing around. You know that there's a tornado coming. So that's my little Missouri anecdote for you. But yes, we are not in Kansas anymore. So let's just go down the yellow brick road and start this journey as a team. Okay, so let's start with a definition of generative AI or Gen AI or however you decide to talk about it. I'm going to be boring and read this slide and then kind of contextualize it for you. What is generative AI? It's a type of artificial intelligence that can create novel, notice I say novel, not new, novel content and ideas, including conversations, stories, images, videos, and music. And like all artificial intelligence, generative AI is powered by machine learning models, very, very large models that are pre-trained on vast amounts of data, and they're commonly referred to as foundation models, or FMs. Now, it's kind of an interesting moment that we're in because humans actually have been experimenting with quantifying language for a long time. And decades ago, we started looking at the relationships between words. And we're looking at them in a statistical fashion. So we call these word embeddings. And these are the statistical relationships between words. And this is how we're starting to create these foundational models. But they're basically a set of numbers that we associate with words that map where they live in a multi-dimensional space in relation to other words. It looks something like this. So if you take the example of a word like dog and cat, those two words are statistically more likely to be related to each other than, for example, cat and bus, or cat and car, or cat and river. And those are somewhere else. So we're trying to figure out statistically what is the likelihood for this word and this word to be next to each other, as opposed to way over here. So we use these word embedding space concept, and we have a family of algorithms to help us achieve these statistical mappings. And this family of algorithms are called word2vec, and they've actually been around for quite a long time. I think a lot of folks who have been working in AI for a while are thinking, there's really nothing new under the sun. We've been thinking about this stuff for a long time. But these are, basically, you're taking many documents together and you tokenize all the words, and you build these large language models by figuring out which words are statistically able to be closer to another. And these algorithms all feed into the many useful things provided to us by this field called natural language processing, which has also been around for quite a while, right? And using NLP, you can do really useful things. You can summarize blog posts into just one paragraph. You can create a Q&A bot. You can analyze the sentiment of a database, so you can figure out if you want to go to that hotel in Nantes or the other one, right? You can create tools to help you analyze speech and written words so that Alexa, a tool like Alexa, could understand you. You could create an itinerary for yourself for kind of top things to do in Paris. There's all sorts of amazing stuff you can do with these kinds of models. And I'm sure that a lot of us are using them today without even realizing it when we jump into TripAdvisor and figure out what's the best strategy. So we've had word2vec, we've had NLP around for quite a while, but in 2017, there was a little bit of a breakthrough. It's actually a leap forward in the field by a paper called Attention is All You Need, and that was written at the University of Toronto. This paper introduced the concept of transformers. Sounds awesome, especially in a movie context, but transformers in this context are a little bit less flashy. But the transformer architecture built models based on the concept of attention. And attention is this mechanism that enables the model to learn context from the preceding words and parameters. And the concept of attention enabled models to scale the understanding of relationships between words efficiently using parallel computing. So we have this amazing convergence of a new technique, parallel computing, a lot of firepower, a lot of GPU available, and the entire internet on which to train. So it's this kind of amazing convergence of power that we're using nowadays to create these enormous large language models. And this revolutionized generative AI and opened the door for much more accurately predicted text. I don't know if you've noticed, but even I noticed recently that on my iPhone, when I'm speaking into it, it's picking up my words much better than it used to. Maybe it's trained me. Maybe I'm the large language. People call me a large language model anyway. But to be accurate, these models have to be trained on really a lot of data. I think that's what's been happening for my iPhone. And there's been training and training and retraining. For example, the Bloom model has 176 billion, with a B, billion parameters, and they're just getting bigger. So we'd call them LLMs, or large language models, because they really are very, very large. Now there's a little problem here, right? And I'm sure you've noticed, anyone who uses ChatGPT once in a while, they have this habit of hallucinating, right? So here, I deliberately prompted it with a misspelled infinitive. Here's the French teacher coming out. I wanted to see if I could force it to give me a hallucination, and it actually worked. So I asked it to give me the conjugation of the verb historialiser. I made this up. And it said, I have no idea. But then I asked, give me the present tense of the French verb chuchoter with two T's. And it beautifully conjugated this misspelling. And, it's like the errors all the way through. It's really beautiful. And it's such a cheery kind of chatbot. It says, I hoped, or I hope we can chat more, because ChatGPT is very polite, right? The thing about ChatGPT is it doubles down. It has no backbone, so you can say, you lie. You are hallucinating. This is not true. So here I asked it, really, is that the proper spelling? Absolutely, yes, the proper spelling. Isn't it spelled with one T? Oh, I apologize. So it's so polite. I think it must be trained in California. People have been teasing it because it feels very Californian to be kind of, kind of laid back as a chatbot. And then I just had to double check myself because I thought I myself was hallucinating, and I just double checked in the dictionary just to make sure this is dreadful. This is dreadful for any French teacher like me. I mean, if I would have had my students be roaming around ChatGPT asking for conjugations, it's just a mess. So why do LLMs hallucinate? Why do they make up stuff, right? Here's a quote for you. They're a probability-based creation. They're fed huge quantities of public text. Their output is only as accurate as their input. And hallucinations are shown to be a statistically inevitable byproduct of any imperfect generative model that is trained to maximize training likelihood. So we're dealing with statistics here, and weird stuff is going to happen, which is fine, except that ChatGPT has this interesting rhetoric that it gives you, to double down and then to roll back in this kind of very strange way. And like I said, they're just, these are chatbots which are built to be polite, they're built to be helpful, and to seem credible no matter what. They're believable, and then they double down. And this is tough. This is tough for people who don't have context. So even with all of these issues, all of this weirdness, all of this hallucination, I do feel sometimes that I myself am losing it, for many reasons, but specifically when I'm dealing with LLMs. But we can fast forward to fall 2023, and we have over 7,000 apps. And this screenshot is about a couple weeks old, actually. There's an AI for that as a website. You can look, if you need an AI, there's probably an AI for that. So you can look at this website, and there are 7,000 apps that are, exponentially growing to cover every use case you can think of. You need, my personal favorite is, I'm standing in front of the fridge. I have no idea what I'm going to cook for dinner tonight, so I take a picture, and it'll give me a recipe. Totally doable with generative AI, and it's given me some good thoughts. So these are kind of useful little things that you could do. And then it's really a gold rush. There's no end in sight, and is especially prevalent in educational contexts. This is really interesting. Let's talk about it. I want to pause and just mention that, I don't know if I actually watched, for this talk, I watched Charlie Chaplin's The Kid. Have you seen this movie? It's an astonishing movie. And the little boy who plays the kid grew up to be Uncle Fester in the Addams Family. Did you know that? I didn't know that. I thought that was interesting. What a long and prestigious career he had. Anyway, back to AI. What has this proliferation of these tools meant for education? So arguably, this explosion of AI helpers has disrupted education more than any other sector. I'd love to get your thoughts on this if there are other sectors you think that have been disrupted more than education. I think education really took it on the nose. And if you talk to classroom teachers in English in America, and I would say out of the frying pan and into the fire, because we had COVID, that's the frying pan, and generative AI is the fire, right? So we've just recovered from one thing, and we've gone to something really, really disruptive. So teachers are finding themselves just emerging from one crisis into another. And the thing about the education sector is it doesn't move as fast as technology. It just, it takes a little while to figure this out. We have a very interesting situation in the US where they have taken affirmative action to the Supreme Court. So you no longer have race-based admissions that are legally permissible in higher education. And guess what the university said? Well, if we can't use other factors, we're just going to rely on the essay. And I'm sitting there going, you've got to be kidding me. Do not rely on admission essays in this day and age. People are going to ChatGPT the hell out of it. It's going to be... and I know this has happened because I can give you an idea of what happened with our cloud clubs. When we launched our cloud clubs, it was very selective to become a captain. So our student leaders are called captains. And they have to write me a beautiful admission essay. And I saw the level of ChatGPT that was happening in these essays, and I flipped out. And I immediately pivoted, and we added a video component. Turns out they take ChatGPT, they create a video script. This is a wild ride we're having. But anyway, even if you're not kind of embedded in higher ed, or if you're not a classroom teacher, this is going to impact you, and here's why. It's going to impact developer education. It's going to impact the training that you produce, that you're asking your new developers to take. It's going to impact the new developers that have come through these systems and are coming into your companies with different ways of working, different ways of thinking, and different ways of organizing their work, because it's come up through K-12 education. It's going to be impacting adult education, primarily online education, definitely college education. And it's really going to impact all the ways that we build relationships with people, right, who want to learn from us. So you senior developers, I see a bunch of senior developers here, right? And you're going to be mentoring the younger folk coming in. And it's a new world. So we're going to have to figure out how to help them learn in the best possible way so that it sticks, not so as just, chat GPTing everything. So this is this moment where I'm going to ask you, why should you care? Because as an engineer, you're a learner, you're a teacher, you're going through the ranks of your career, and you're helping other people, come up through the ranks. And they're going to also become a teacher. So this is kind of this moment where we need to think about how we're learning and how we're teaching. And just also to throw into the mix that a lot of the new developers coming into our companies survived COVID as a student, right? So they have a lot of challenges that they're going to have to face, integrating into teams and figuring out how to best manage their career. So we're ready though, right? We're in this, ChatGPT world, and educational institutions and teachers and faculty and employers are going to have to just pay close attention to the care and feeding of the student experience as they navigate AI tooling. So I don't know, this is the tagline of The Kid, the movie that Chaplin is in, the care and feeding. Please take care of this child. So we're going to take care of the children. We're going to do our very best. So here's the state of where we're at within education. Some amazing stats here. 89% of students admitted to using ChatGPT. And it's really interesting to watch the usage because in the summer it just craters and then it, right in the fall it goes right back up. There's a student at Columbia who did a guest article in the Chronicle of Higher Education saying, writing is no longer much of an example in learning. So I work at Amazon. We have a very heavy writing culture, very, very heavy writing culture. It's all about the one-page doc, the two-page narrative, or the six-pager. So we are writing, and it'll be really interesting to see how the entire company's culture will have to evolve for folks who are just not used to writing that much anymore. Fascinating. Some folks are trying to ban AI. I have friends in some schools in Boston. They're just using tools like Turnitin.com and GPT-0. But those are scary because the false positives, people have students reported that their professor took their essays and ran them through ChatGPT and failed the whole class because it came back as a positive. And that's dreadful. That's a terrible student experience because some of those kids, were completely on the up and up. They were trying to write, originally. And we see every school, every department is creating their own policy, and hilariously, admissions programs have not evolved at all. They're just kind of like, whatever, just gonna figure it out as we go. They just can't move fast enough. So, and it's interesting also to think about that students aren't really comfortable with this world either sometimes. They're frustrated because some of their friends are using these tools, but they themselves feel that that's cheating. So a lot of students are very concerned. But in the future, maybe we'll be leaning less on writing, maybe more on oral presentation, interesting technology like what we saw in the keynote. Maybe there are interesting multimedia visual type of topics and strategies that we can use to disseminate learning. So that's a really interesting thing. Let's talk about some of the major issues now that I've scared everybody half to death. So I live in Massachusetts. I can go to Martha's Vineyard. I was just there a couple weeks ago. Martha's Vineyard is where they film Jaws, and I was so mad because they have a big sign, you're not supposed to jump off the Jaws bridge anymore. Everybody does anyway, but that was a fun movie from Martha's Vineyard. But yes, we are gonna need a bigger boat for sure. And I thought that this was an accurate representation of a data scientist training an LLM, right? Just keep feeding it. Oh my God. So, yeah, good old Jaws. So let's talk about the state of the art. Where are we now with all of these topics, and how are people thinking about these topics? So some researchers like Timnit, if you ever see Timnit Gebru saying anything, listen carefully. She's the first whistleblower that people started really paying attention to. And some researchers warn that we might be approaching what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. Folks from OpenAI who built ChatGPT are saying that AGI is an existential threat to humanity. And it does make you wonder why, if it is an existential threat to humanity, why we're keeping building these things, but here we are. Business. So a big problem, is that by making these interfaces so credible, and ChatGPT is such a lovely thing to talk to. It's a wonderful chatbot. And that they're acting human, and what worries me is that human beings might lose their confidence in their innate humanness. And here comes back this concept of centering your own humanity. Have confidence in yourself, in your creativity, in your creative ideas. Some people have said that AI is going to help us be more creative. I call baloney. We are perfectly capable as human beings of being creative on our own. I have at least one idea every hour. So there's a wonderful book by a choreographer named Twyla Tharp I think it's called The Creative Impulse. And she talks about creativity as being practice. If you keep practicing, you'll keep having these amazing creative moments and creative ideas. So double down, in this moment, double down on your humanity, on your own innate creativity. That's my call to arms. The first one. We don't need to turn to AI first to generate creative ideas or novelty. Let's just focus on some 3 basic aspects of building and using generative AI models that people kind of look at when they're talking about ethics. So the first is how you train it, the data you feed it, and how you use the model. So let's talk about these kind of big questions. So training an LLM. It takes a lot of energy, interestingly. And detoxing it costs human resources. There are humans behind these models who are going through and combing through and being paid very little. There was a wonderful article in Time magazine about the folks in Kenya in a little company who detox these models manually, one by one, and the trauma that they experienced was actually very, very damaging. So because what we're doing is we're scraping all this data from the public internet, right? And there's a lot of toxicity in that data, and then they hire these humans to kind of detox it. They suffer mental consequences. They're not paid very much because they're labeling all of this stuff bad, not bad, right? But also energy. How much energy are we spending training these very, very, very large models? It's very interesting. So Hugging Face, which is a wonderful company here in France, they calculated the carbon used in training Bloom using a software tool called Code Carbon. And it tracked the carbon dioxide emissions the Bloom was producing in real time over a period of 18 days. And they estimated that Bloom's training led to 25 metric tons. 25 metric tons. That is 60 New York to London flights. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Think about that. That's 60 New York to London flights of carbon dioxide emissions. However, it's done on a supercomputer that uses nuclear power, supposedly, and so that's a little bit more, green, a little bit more energy efficient. And if you compare, so Bloom isn't even that bad, right? If you compare GPT-3 and Meta's OPT, they were estimated to emit more than 575 metric tons of carbon dioxide, respectively, during training. So GPT-3, 500 metric tons. Bloom was 25 metric tons. I think we really need to think about this. So we need to think about, what we're doing, actually what we're doing in terms of this training and the use of energy, how we're doing this. I want to temper that gloomy thought with the idea that maybe we could use generative AI to suggest like flight patterns that would be optimized or energy grids that would be optimized. Maybe there are other ways that we can use generative AI to kind of offset the task. Let's talk about the data. So as we like to say, garbage in, garbage out, right? We see that there's toxicity and bias in the data. Because it's just everything. Everything's just going into these models. And there are really a lot of questions concerning the ways LLMs are trained. Some companies are a little more open than others about exactly what data they're using. But I'm really concerned about the question of copyright. My daughter's an artist in Montreal. And I wonder, in this day and age, to be an artist and a writer, it's a little scary. Legal scholars are wrestling with this idea of who owns this novel generated data, and is there copyright infringement happening when you train on a piece of art? And it's just going through the courts right now. It's very interesting. Can you copyright it? And how can you cite it? This is actually something I struggle with. How can you use something that's generated that you can't reproduce and then cite it as a source? What's happening to the concept of primary sources in this day and age? And then another thing that's interesting is that we're training on all this data, but not everything in the world has been digitized, right? So I have this degree in medieval literature, but there are an awful lot of manuscripts at the Bibliothèque Nationale that have not been digitized. I know, because I had to roll through microfiche to look at some of these. It was dreadful. So there are these interesting things, these wax cylinders. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're a very early way of capturing audio. And there are some interesting, even indigenous languages have been captured on these wax cylinders, and they're just figuring out how to digitize them. So the museums are playing catch up. The museums and the archives are trying to catch up with very little budget, to digitize this stuff so that we can train on them. Good news. I tested ChatGPT on the Cherokee language, so that's an indigenous American tribe. I tested it, and it actually generated, in a nice font, Cherokee language. So that was interesting. So there is, some stuff is being digitized. It's kind of cool, but not everything. And I asked it also then, as a test to see how much esoteric data I could get out of it. I asked it to generate a blog post in Old French, and it told me, la beauté de la langue d'antan, l'élégance de l'old French. Oh, give me a freaking break. Anyway, not super. So, and then there's this idea of using the model, privacy, and safety. I'm quite interested in this as well as an educator. I tested ChatGPT and tried to see if it would generate a class roster if I uploaded all my students' emails and everything. It's like, no. So I think that was pretty good. They gave me the right answer. So a lot of these platforms like ChatGPT are not really intended for use by children, but kids are obviously using them. I know in Italy it was banned for a little while until there were some safety mechanisms put in. So we need to watch out for PII, personally identifiable information that we're inputting into these systems. I know in Europe you have the right to be forgotten. How on earth is that going to work in GPT-3 or in some of these models? I don't know. And the legal scholars are working on this. Very interesting moment. Cool. Okay, we're up to number 4. Let's talk about some AI ethics frameworks that are already in place. So we know that there are a lot of considerations pertaining to fair use and building these AI systems. So probably you could surmise that there are some organizations building the frameworks, right? So I did a little round up the usual suspects, and it turns out there are a lot of gin joints, as Bogie would say. There are a lot of gin joints right now. They're all building their own ethics frameworks. Yay. As it turns out, they tend to focus on several aspects, kind of common aspects that we've already identified as a major issue in building and using AI. So here is a little scroll of the 17 that I found. I couldn't fit it all in one slide, but there are all kinds of different ethical frameworks being produced kind of company by company or organizations by organization. So IEEE has one, OECD World Economic Forum has one, Stanford's Institute of Human-Centered AI, UNESCO has one. So we're in a moment where it's just a proliferation of frameworks. So that's an interesting thing. And it tells you a little bit about, how people are thinking about about this concept. They're interested in it, but they're not working together, right? In general, in these frameworks, I identified 10 general issues that people want to tackle when talking about these. So in general, we have the problem of transparency. We're trying to make these models be more transparent about how the algorithms are working, how they make decisions, and the data they were using. Fairness, avoiding discriminatory or biased outcomes. Accountability, taking responsibility for AI's decisions. Human oversight, ensuring that humans can intervene and stop something from happening. So we're going to not do the robot drone scenario here. Robustness and safety, stopping models from doing harm, making sure they're secure. A lot of companies are very concerned that employees are feeding data, confidential data from their companies into these models, and they're just ingesting and retraining on them. I know somebody recently did this. I can't remember the company name. Inclusivity, ensuring models don't exacerbate inequality. Collaboration among stakeholders from different industries. So if you're in the healthcare sector and you want to work with the education sector or the defense industry or whatever, you should be able to have a common sort of language, a common framework, and a common set of goals. And then long-term considerations, managing risks and benefits over time. So these are kind of the 10 big ideas that these frameworks are trying to tackle. Okay, come on. There we go. I'd like to just take a step back and have a little bit of different perspective. I'd like to take this up to a higher level, and here's where I'm going to ask you to lean back on your your humanities background, all the things you learned in school about ethics. So sometimes I wonder, with all of these 17 frameworks and all the companies doing their own thing, are we losing sight of the forest for the trees? Are we kind of lost in the details? Let's take a step back and think about what ethics is, right? The field of ethics or moral philosophy involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of right or wrong behavior. And I want to just mention that I consider ethics not particularly relative. I consider morals to be relative. Some parts of the world do this and it's okay, and it's not okay here. These kind of things, those are morals. I think of ethics as a little bit more higher level, a little higher arching. So we can talk about, bigger ideas here. And I want to draw on the 3 big pillars of ethics from your classes in moral philosophy. I know you all remember this, right? Meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Everybody's like, oh, right? Let's talk about meta-ethics. So if you consider using a meta-framework like this, you can say that, you can lean on your understanding of meta-ethics. These are this abstract questioning, that can take place before data starts to be scraped at all. You start asking questions, should we be doing this? What are we trying to achieve? What are we optimizing for? Who could be harmed? Who would benefit? Why do we care? Why are we doing this? So you can start asking these ethical questions before any data gets scraped, before anything gets ingested. And then you can use your normative ethics to create standards over the right or wrong nature of what you choose to do, right? Start asking questions and then start building your standards. And then finally, you can lean on your understanding of applied ethics to determine how to mitigate the potential harm of your actions. Question, framework, and then mitigation. So this is this kind of step-by-step process. I'm giving you a framework here that you can take to your managers whenever they ask you to build something crazy. And you can say, here's what Jen taught us. So we're going to just lean back on our humanities background. So let's go ahead and put this in practice, right? So if we take a look at some meta-ethics of generative AI, we can start asking questions. And questions might look like this. Should we be allowed to use copyright material to train our models? Should we be allowed to train models using confidential healthcare data? Probably not. Should we be allowed to scrape student or underage users' PII, personally identifiable information? So here's a use case. Your manager comes to you and says, hey, new startup, let's go. We're going to create an AI to suggest the best locations for a large-scale electrical grid project. I'm a sustainability ambassador at Amazon, so I always tend to use these kind of interesting sustainability topics. But what if you were given this task? You're going to create an AI, and it's going to propose where we're going to build and how we're going to build a new electrical grid. So what are the meta-ethical questions you could ask? And I will open this up to the audience, and I have swag. We're going to build a new AI around building an electrical grid. Any ideas? Meta-ethical questions? I will prompt you like the LLM that I am. Okay, so here's a question you could say, how will this take into account native land claims, right? How will local water sources be impacted? This is a very kind of American question, right? We're worried about, stepping on native land. So maybe these are the questions we need to ask, and maybe this will impact the kind of data or or give us some parameters around the data that we use. Okay, let's try another one. Normative ethics, okay? So we've started to ask questions using meta-ethics, kind of large overarching questions. Now we're ready to set up some test cases that will allow us to set the standards, right? So here's some examples. A bot has been set up to distribute some information about mental health services. Should it be required to disclose its sources and the fact that it's a bot? Probably. So you want to set some standards around that, right? Maybe build an interface to allow this to happen. Or an art-generating bot that's scraping Dribble. Should the company who created it be required to pay royalties to the artists? Probably, right? What are some normative ethical test cases that we can set to make sure that our new electrical grid design does no harm? Any ideas? So our meta questions suggested that we need to respect native land claims as a core value. If that's a core value of what we're building, how can we block the training from ingesting those latitudes and longitudes? Should we set some standards? Any other ideas? Any standards we could set for this topic, for this project? Think about it and come back to me. No worries. You can take it into account. You can set limits on water usage. You can build with ecology in mind as a standard. My standard is ecology, right? Okay. And also you can check for protected species in the data, right? And then the last one, applied ethics of generative AI. So let's determine some practical application of the standards we just set, right? Ask the question, set the standard. Now we're going to determine these practical applications. So if you're chatting to a bot, it has to disclose it's a bot. If you have an AI coding helper, maybe it should list the software licenses, in the interface that it's using to make sure that we're using the correct licenses the correct way. Maybe we should, build the bots with these preventative measures against bias and toxicity. And maybe, this is an interesting idea, maybe the model should disclose how much carbon you're using with every prompt. That would be kind of a downer, but why not? I think that's a really interesting concept. So if we use applied ethics, we can set some standards for our new electrical grid model design, right? Maybe by revealing lists of harms, maybe by showing a map, in the interface where we're going to block out the places where we're not going to be designing this thing, showing where the protected species are, and just mitigating harm, mitigating impact. So that's kind of a really a beautiful way that you could have this discussion with your manager or with the folks on your board who are suggesting a thing. Now you can say, let's do this, this, and this before anything happens, right? And then build it properly. So that's what I gift you today. Okay, we've come to about the end of our time together, and I just want to give you a little bit of a warning, but I also want to leave you with some hope, right? So this is my very favorite movie, À bout de souffle. Do not watch that crappy remake. Watch the original. It's a wonderful movie. I love it. The costume design in this movie always blows me away. I don't know if you've noticed, but whenever they're wearing stripes and they're getting along, the two characters are getting along well, they wear plaid. But when they're not getting along, they wear different kinds of stripes. Take a look at the movie and you'll see it. It's really, really well done. Godard. So I've given you these kind of tools. I've given you a framework that can help you to build and consume and use these new AI models in the wild. But I just want to close it with a couple words on where this new world may take us. This is all conjecture. We don't know. Jean is not sure either. But I suggest that we have officially entered a second industrial revolution, at least a second industrial revolution, right? I brought you some pictures of some weird stuff that happened in my area in Boston. We had a lot of ladies from Ireland called the Lowell Mill Girls. They came over to work in the textile mills in a town called Lowell near Boston. And it was interesting. It wasn't all, as bad as these kids with the barefoot, it's really scary to look at on the machines. But a lot of the Lowell Mill girls actually elevated their social status by working hard in the mills and then, helping to create unions and, different kind of social aspects that happened. So there's always a flip side. There's always a good and a bad aspect. But the weirdest thing that happened, I think, during the Industrial Revolution in Boston was the molasses flood. Molasses is, I don't know how to say it in French, but it's really sticky syrup. It's like a sticky syrup. It's really thick. Like 1 million gallons flooded into the Italian neighborhood, which is the North End. It's not funny because several people were killed, but what a way to go, right? The weird things that happened during the Industrial Revolution in Boston. People still think you can smell molasses in the North End when it rains. So there's always ramifications of interesting industrial things that we do. Another favorite movie, La Reine Margot. So we're thinking that maybe the advent of generative AI is like what happened when we introduced the printing press, right? And I'm not sure. Some people in the AI space love to talk about how awesome it was to introduce the printing press. I'm all for a printing press. Printing press is great. I'm a fan. But it caused a lot of trauma, and you can draw this direct line from the invention of the printing press to the expansion of literacy, which is good. The Protestant Reformation, take it or leave it. And then the wars of religion, which were definitely not good, right? So there's this really interesting historical line. And as the legend goes, Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg on October 31st in 1517. And because of the printing press, broadsheet copies were printed within 17 days, and they appeared in London 17 days later. So you can see how fast information started to be disseminated, due to the printing press. And, the Protestant Reformation was a moment of social upheaval and to a certain extent trauma. The wars of religion were for sure a lot of trauma. My country was populated by the vestiges of the wars of religion coming over. So it's really interesting. I really don't think we need to go into a war of religion due to generative AI. I would really prefer not to do that. But I just think that people need to understand that when there's a revolution, when there's something really big and impactful happening in the industrial space, there are ramifications. There are things that happen. But I like to think about where we could go with this. And in the Crystal Palace in 1851, the big exposition, there was actually a little revolt against the Industrial Revolution, which was the artisans and the architects and the weavers and the printers and the paper makers and the craftspeople. They said, we're going to start something new. We're going to start, and it became known as the arts and crafts movement. My house in Boston was built in 1927, so it's at the end of the arts and crafts movement, and the craftsmanship is beautiful. But these artisans said what they saw at the Great Exposition of 1851, which was a celebration of the Industrial Revolution, was that, here's the quote, "The architect, the upholsterer, the paper stainer, the weaver, the calico printer, and the potter produced novelty without beauty, or beauty without intelligence." And that's exactly what's happening now. That's exactly what I think is happening now. So we need to lean in on our humanity. We need to lean in on how awesome we are as craftspeople, I think. And I would love to have another call for craftsmanship and embrace artisanship. Embrace the arts, the decorative arts. Pick up a paintbrush, like I love to do in the evenings. Just reclaim what makes us human. And And just even think about how your work as a programmer might translate to beautifully constructed code bases. You know, there's an artisanship to the code that we write too. Code is a type of language, and it can be beautiful as well. So I would just like to challenge you. How are you going to meet this era head on? How are you going to embrace your own humanity, but also, you know, be open to these new tools? And I would love to get your thoughts. You can always come follow me on Twitter, X, it's called X, and my website's jenlooper.com. If you're interested in our programs for students, we're at s12d.com/students. And if you've got an amazing question, I will be happy to hand you over the book, which is actually Computer Science for Kids. This is written for ages 11 through 13. So if you've got little kids who are interested in these topics, this is a curriculum that will get them through it. And I have a lot of swag. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate your attentiveness.